billionaire filed for divorce. Until he saw the pregnancy test in the trash and begged her to stay. She knew this conversation would destroy her, but she had to hear it anyway. June Carter stood frozen in the marble foyer of their penthouse, watching her husband of 3 years pace like a caged wolf. Nicholas Wexler, the man who'd once whispered promises under starlit skies, now looked at her like she was another business problem to solve. "June, we need to talk." His voice carried that clinical tone she'd grown to hate, the same one he used during board meetings. The late afternoon sun streamed through their floor-to-ceiling windows, casting long shadows across the pristine living room. Everything in their home was perfect, curated, expensive, cold, just like their marriage had become. Nicholas ran his fingers through his dark hair, a gesture she once found endearing. Now it just reminded her of all the nights he'd come home past midnight, hair disheveled from stress, eyes already on his phone instead of her. "I've been thinking about us," he continued, his steel-gray eyes avoiding hers. "About what we've become." June's heart hammered against her ribs. She pressed her palms against her jeans, trying to steady herself. This morning had been different, hopeful even. She'd taken the test 3 times, each result the same. 2 pink lines. A miracle she'd been waiting for, praying for, dreaming about during all those lonely nights. "Nicholas, I can't do this anymore." The words hit her like physical blows. "I can't pretend we're happy when we're both miserable." She watched him pace, this man who'd built an empire from nothing. Nicholas Wexler, CEO of Stellar Dynamics, the brilliant mind behind revolutionary satellite technology. Forbes had called him the visionary of our generation. But standing here, he looked like a stranger wearing her husband's face. "When's the last time we actually talked?" he asked, finally meeting her eyes. "Really talked? Not about schedules or social events or business dinners?" June opened her mouth, then closed it, because he was right, and they both knew it. "I used to come home excited to see you," Nicholas continued, his voice softer now, tinged with something that might have been regret. "Your laugh could fix any bad day. Remember how you used to leave little notes in my briefcase?" A tear escaped down her cheek. She remembered. She remembered everything. How he used to dance with her in their tiny first apartment. How he'd sketch out his dreams on napkins while she planned gardens that would never exist. "I remember," she whispered. "But somewhere along the way I lost that. I lost us." He stopped pacing, his shoulders sagging. "I've become someone you don't recognize. Hell, I don't recognize myself anymore." June wanted to scream, to tell him about the secret growing inside her, about the tiny life that proved their love had created something beautiful, even in the darkness. But the words stuck in her throat like thorns. "So what are you saying?" Her voice came out smaller than intended. Nicholas pulled out an envelope from his jacket pocket. Legal documents. The sight of them made her stomach lurch. "I'm saying we both deserve better than this." He set the papers on their glass coffee table with infinite care, as if they were explosives. "I'm saying, I want a divorce." The world tilted. June gripped the back of their leather couch, her knuckles white against the dark material. "I've already signed," he said quietly. "Your lawyer will explain everything. You'll be more than comfortable, June. You'll never have to worry about money." Money. As if money could fill the crater in her chest where her heart used to be. Nicholas moved toward their bedroom, probably to pack another suitcase for another business trip. But he paused at the doorway, his broad shoulders tense. "For what it's worth," he said without turning around. "I did love you. I still do. That's why I have to let you go." The bedroom door closed with a soft click, leaving June alone with the divorce papers and a secret that would change everything. What would you do if the person you loved most decided you deserved better than them? 3 positive pregnancy tests don't lie, but sometimes the truth is too heavy to carry alone. June sat on the cold marble floor of their master bathroom, her back against the pristine white cabinets. The 3 pregnancy tests lay scattered beside her like fallen dominoes, each one showing those life-changing pink lines that had appeared just hours before Nicholas dropped his bombshell. The irony wasn't lost on her. This morning she'd been planning the perfect surprise. She'd even bought a tiny onesie from the boutique downtown. Soft yellow cotton with Daddy's little astronaut embroidered in silver thread. A nod to Nicholas's space technology empire. A bridge between his world and theirs. Now that onesie sat hidden in her dresser drawer, a dream wrapped in tissue paper. Her phone buzzed against the marble. A text from her best friend, Lennox. "Coffee tomorrow? You sounded weird when I called earlier." June stared at the message, How could she explain that in the span of 12 hours she'd discovered she was pregnant and her marriage was over? That the man who'd once promised her the moon was now serving her divorce papers? The sound of Nicholas moving around their bedroom made her chest tighten. He was packing again, probably for his trip to Houston tomorrow. Stellar Dynamics was launching another satellite, and of course he'd be there. He was always somewhere else. June pulled herself up from the floor, her legs unsteady. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her long, dark hair hung limp around her face, and her usually bright hazel eyes looked hollow. When had she become this fragile version of herself? She remembered the woman Nicholas had fallen in love with, the one who'd drag him to farmers' markets on Saturday mornings, who'd sketch garden designs on restaurant napkins while he talked about rocket trajectories. That June had been fearless, vibrant, full of dreams about the life they'd build together. But somewhere between his first billion and his third merger, that woman had started to fade. June? Nicholas's voice came through the bathroom door, startling her. I'm heading to the office. We should talk about logistics when I get back. Logistics, not feelings, not their future, not the tiny heartbeat now growing inside her. She opened the door to find him in his signature charcoal suit, looking every inch the powerful CEO that Time magazine had featured on their cover last month. But there were dark circles under his eyes, and his usually perfect hair was disheveled. When will you be back? She asked, her voice steadier than she felt. Late. The board meeting ran over and I have 3 calls with Tokyo. He paused, studying her face. For a moment she saw a flicker of the old Nicholas, the one who used to notice when she was upset, who'd cancel meetings to bring her soup when she was sick. Are you okay? You look pale. The concern in his voice almost broke her resolve. She could tell him right now. 3 words that would change everything. I'm pregnant, Nicholas. But the divorce papers on their coffee table flashed in her mind. He'd already made his choice. I'm fine, she lied. Just tired. Nicholas nodded, but his eyes lingered on her face. June, I know it's hard, but we're doing the right thing. We both know we're not the same people we were when we got married. You're not, she wanted to scream. I'm still here. I've been here the whole time waiting for you to come home. To really come home. Instead, she nodded. Drive safe. He leaned forward, and for a heartbeat she thought he might kiss her goodbye like he used to. But he stopped himself, his jaw clenching. I'll have Morrison contact you about the house. You can keep it, or we can sell and split. Nicholas. Her voice came out sharper than intended. Can we not do this right now? He stepped back, his expression closing off again, the moment of vulnerability gone. Of course, I'm sorry. He grabbed his briefcase and headed toward their front door. I'll see you tonight. The penthouse fell silent except for the distant hum of city traffic 40 floors below. June walked to their living room window, watching Nicholas's black Tesla disappear into the Manhattan streets. She pressed her palm against her still flat stomach, wondering if the tiny life inside could feel her heartbreak. It's just you and me now, little one, she whispered to the glass, and I don't know what we're going to do. But deep down, she did know. She couldn't stay here, couldn't pretend to be civil while her world crumbled. She couldn't watch Nicholas divide their life into neat legal categories while their child grew in secret. June pulled out her phone and typed a message to Lennox. Can I stay with you for a few days? I'll explain everything tomorrow. The response came immediately. Always. Keys under the mat. Are you okay? June looked around their perfect penthouse one last time, at the abstract art Nicholas had chosen, at the designer furniture that no one ever really sat on, at the life they'd built that looked beautiful from the outside but felt empty within. I will be, she typed back. But as she headed to their bedroom to pack, one thought echoed in her mind. Nicholas didn't know he was about to lose everything that truly mattered. Some revelations hit you like lightning. Others creep in like dawn, changing everything you thought you knew. Nicholas's key turned in the lock at 11:47 p.m., the sound echoing through their penthouse like a gunshot in the silence. The board meeting had been brutal. 3 hours of arguing about the Mars satellite project, followed by endless calls with investors in different time zones. All he wanted was a glass of whiskey, and maybe, if he was lucky, a few hours of sleep. But as he stepped into their foyer, something felt wrong. The air was too still, too quiet. Even when June was asleep, the penthouse held traces of her presence, her lavender perfume lingering near the entrance, her architectural magazines spread across the coffee table, her reading glasses perched on the kitchen counter. Tonight, the space felt hollow. June? His voice bounced off the marble walls, unanswered. Nicholas loosened his tie and walked toward their bedroom, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the hardwood floors. The sound seemed unnaturally loud in the emptiness. Their bedroom door stood ajar. He pushed it open and immediately noticed what was missing: June's jewelry box from the dresser, the small succulent plant she kept by the window, the stack of garden design books that usually towered beside her side of the bed. His stomach clenched. He'd known this moment would come, but seeing the physical evidence of her departure hit him like a punch to the gut. Nicholas sat heavily on their king-sized bed, the same bed where they'd once stayed up all night talking about their dreams, where he'd proposed with a ring hidden inside a tiny potted orchid, knowing how much she loved growing things. When had he stopped noticing the garden she sketched? When had her excited chatter about landscape projects become background noise to his phone calls? His reflection in their dresser mirror looked haggard. At 37, Nicholas Wexler was worth $2 billion, controlled technology that could revolutionize space exploration, and commanded respect from world leaders. But he couldn't keep the one person who mattered most. The bathroom light was still on. Nicholas walked toward it, intending to brush his teeth and collapse into bed. But as he reached for his toothbrush, something in the small wastebasket caught his eye. White plastic, rectangular, familiar, yet completely foreign. His hand trembled as he reached down and pulled out the pregnancy test, his brain struggling to process what he was seeing. One line, two lines, the word pregnant in small digital letters. The world stopped spinning. Nicholas stared at the test, his knees suddenly weak. He gripped the marble countertop to steady himself, his successful businessman facade crumbling like a house of cards. June was pregnant. June was pregnant. And he'd asked for a divorce. June was pregnant, and she'd said nothing while he tore their marriage apart with clinical precision. His mind raced backward through the day, her pale complexion, the way she'd seemed fragile, almost breakable, the look in her eyes when he'd mentioned the divorce papers, not just hurt but something deeper, something that looked like goodbye. Oh God, he whispered to his reflection. What have I done? Nicholas fumbled for his phone, his fingers shaking as he dialed her number. It went straight to voicemail. Her voice, recorded months ago, sounded bright and happy, the June he'd fallen in love with. Hi, you've reached June. I'm probably elbow deep in soil somewhere, but leave a message and I'll call you back. The beep felt like an accusation. June, it's me. I found... Please call me back. We need to talk. This changes everything. His voice cracked on the last word. He tried again. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. Nicholas sank onto their bathroom floor, still clutching the pregnancy test. In his other hand, his phone felt as useless as a brick. All his power, all his connections, all his billions, none of it could reach the woman who was carrying his child. For the first time in years, Nicholas Wexler felt truly helpless. He thought about the divorce papers downstairs, about the lawyer meeting scheduled for tomorrow, about the life he'd methodically dismantled because he thought he was protecting her from his failures as a husband. But June hadn't needed protection from him. She'd needed him, and now she was gone. Nicholas closed his eyes, remembering their wedding day. June in her simple white dress, barefoot in the sand, laughing as ocean waves crashed around their ankles. She'd insisted on a beach wedding despite his family's disapproval, said she wanted to start their marriage with their feet firmly planted on something real. I love your dreams, Nicholas Wexler, she'd whispered during their first dance, but I love the man behind them even more. When had he stopped being that man? The pregnancy test felt impossibly light in his palm, but its weight was crushing him. His child, their child, a piece of hope growing in the woman he'd just driven away. Nicholas pulled himself off the bathroom floor and walked to their bedroom window. Manhattan glittered below him like fallen stars, beautiful and cold. Somewhere out there, June was trying to figure out how to raise their baby alone. He grabbed his car keys. Nicholas Wexler had built an empire by never accepting defeat. Tomorrow he'd find her. He'd explain. He'd beg if he had to, because some things were more valuable than pride. And he'd just discovered he was about to lose everything that truly mattered. A billionaire can buy almost anything, except forgiveness from the woman who's carrying his heart. Nicholas's Tesla cut through the empty Manhattan streets like a knife through silk. At 12:23 a.m., the city that never sleeps felt eerily quiet, as if holding its breath while he raced against time to find the only person who mattered. His first stop was June's favorite late-night diner on the Lower East Side, Murphy's Corner, a greasy spoon that served the best apple pie in the city. June used to drag him there during their dating days, insisting that you couldn't really know someone until you'd shared pie with them at 2 a.m. The bell above the door chimed as he entered, still wearing his $3,000 suit in a place where most customers paid in crumpled bills. The night shift waitress, a woman named Dolores with kind eyes and silver hair, looked up from wiping down the counter. "We're closed, honey," she started, then paused. "Wait, you're that tech guy, June's husband." Nicholas's chest tightened. "Have you seen her tonight?" Dolores studied his face, taking in the desperation he couldn't hide. "Not for weeks, actually. She used to come in every Thursday around 9, order our veggie omelet and sketch in that little notebook of hers. Haven't seen her in, must be a month now. A month. Had he really been so disconnected that he hadn't noticed June's Thursday night ritual had stopped? "If she comes in," Nicholas said, pulling out his business card and scribbling his personal number on the back. "Please call me, it's important." Dolores pocketed the card. "Everything okay, hun?" Nicholas almost laughed at the question. Nothing was okay. Nothing had been okay for a long time, and he'd been too blind to see it. "Just, please call if you see her." Back in his car, Nicholas scrolled through his contacts looking for anyone who might know where June had gone. The truth was humbling. He knew more about his board members' personal lives than his wife's friends. Lennox Morrison, June's college roommate, now a social worker in Brooklyn. Nicholas had met her exactly 3 times in 3 years of marriage, and each time she'd looked at him like he was a corporate shark circling her best friend. Maybe she'd been right. He found Lennox's number in June's emergency contacts and called, fully expecting to be sent straight to voicemail. Instead, a groggy voice answered on the 3rd ring. "This better be life or death," Lennox mumbled. "Lennox, it's Nicholas. Nicholas Wexler. I'm looking for June." Silence. Then, "You've got some nerve calling me at midnight after what you pulled today." So June was with her. Relief flooded through him, followed immediately by panic. If Lennox already knew about the divorce papers, June had told her everything, which meant she'd also kept the pregnancy secret from her best friend. "I need to see her," Nicholas said. "There's something we need to discuss." "Oh, you mean how you blindsided your pregnant wife with divorce papers?" The words hit him like a physical blow. "Lennox knew about the baby. She told you. She didn't have to. I've been her friend for 12 years, Nicholas. I know the signs. Plus, she's been crying into my couch for the past 4 hours, clutching prenatal vitamins like they're prayer beads." Nicholas pulled over to the side of the road, his hands shaking. June had been suffering while he'd been playing the role of the noble husband setting her free. He'd been an idiot. Worse than an idiot. He'd been cruel. "Lennox, please. I found the test. I know about the baby. I need to talk to her." "You found the—" Lennox's voice shifted from anger to something colder. "You went through her trash?" "I was brushing my teeth. I saw it in the wastebasket. Look, I know how this sounds, but it sounds like you're a controlling billionaire who thinks he can fix everything with the right conversation." Lennox's Brooklyn accent got thicker when she was angry. "June is finally safe from your emotional whiplash and you want to drag her back into your mess? She's my wife. That's my child she's carrying." "Your wife, really? Because this afternoon you couldn't wait to get rid of her." Nicholas closed his eyes, shame burning in his chest. "I was wrong. I was so wrong about everything." "Yeah, well, wrong doesn't fix 3 years of making her feel invisible." "Then let me try to fix it now, please." The line went quiet except for the sound of Lennox breathing. In the background, Nicholas could hear the faint murmur of a television and what might have been someone crying softly. "She's asleep," Lennox finally said, "and she's been through enough today. You want to talk to her? Come back tomorrow." "But Nicholas," her voice turned sharp, "if you hurt her again, if you put her through one more minute of the hell you've been putting her through, I'll make sure you never see that baby. Rich or not, I know people who can make your life very complicated." The line went dead. Nicholas sat in his car on the empty street, staring at his phone. Somewhere across the city, June was crying herself to sleep on a friend's couch, carrying his child and thinking he didn't want either of them. He'd built a company worth billions by making calculated decisions, by thinking 10 steps ahead, by never letting emotions cloud his judgment. But this wasn't business. This was love. Messy, complicated, terrifying love that he'd been too scared to fight for. Tomorrow, he'd start fighting. Because June Carter Wexler was about to discover that when Nicholas Wexler wanted something, really wanted it, he didn't know how to quit. And he'd never wanted anything more than the chance to earn back the woman who was carrying their future. Some apologies require more than words. They require the courage to face the person you've become. June woke up to the sound of aggressive knocking at 7:30 a.m., her eyes swollen from crying, and her body aching from sleeping on Lennox's lumpy couch. For a moment she forgot where she was, forgot about the divorce papers, the pregnancy test, the way Nicholas had looked at her like she was a problem to be solved. Then reality crashed back in. "I'll get it," Lennox muttered, padding to the door in her Wonder Woman pajamas and bunny slippers. Her small Brooklyn apartment felt cramped after the penthouse, but it was warm in ways their marble palace had never been. Pictures covered every surface. Real memories, real laughter, real life. "Lennox, don't," June started, but the door was already opening. "You gotta be kidding me." Lennox's voice carried the particular brand of fury reserved for ex-boyfriends and parking tickets. "I told you to come back later. I brought coffee." Nicholas's voice made June's heart stutter. "And breakfast. From Murphy's Corner." Despite everything, June almost smiled. Murphy's Corner. He remembered. "You think breakfast fixes 3 years of emotional neglect?" Lennox shot back. "No," Nicholas replied quietly, "but I'm hoping it might buy me 5 minutes to talk to my wife." June pulled Lennox's throw blanket tighter around her shoulders and stood up. Through the doorway she could see Nicholas in yesterday's wrinkled suit, his usually perfect hair disheveled, holding a bag from Murphy's and a carrier of coffee cups like peace offerings. He looked like hell. "Good." "June, you don't have to," Lennox started. "It's okay." June's voice came out steadier than she felt. 5 minutes. Lennox shot Nicholas a look that could have melted steel. "I'll be right here. And I mean right here." She positioned herself at the kitchen counter, arms crossed, looking like a bodyguard in cartoon pajamas. Nicholas stepped inside, and suddenly Lennox's apartment felt even smaller. He was too tall, too polished, too much for the cozy space filled with thrift store furniture and plants that actually thrived. "You look tired," he said softly, his gray eyes taking in her rumpled clothes and pale complexion. "Funny how divorce papers can ruin a good night's sleep." June sat back down on the couch, keeping distance between them. Nicholas winced. "June, about yesterday. Which part? The part where you decided our marriage was over, or the part where you had divorce papers drawn up without telling me? I thought I was doing the right thing." "For who?" The words came out sharper than she intended. "Because it sure wasn't right for me." Nicholas set the food on Lennox's coffee table and sat on the edge of the chair across from her, leaning forward with his hands clasped. He looked like he was about to deliver bad news to a board of directors, except his composure was cracking at the edges. "I found the test," he said quietly. June's breath caught. Beside them, Lennox made a small sound of surprise. "You went through my trash?" June's voice was barely a whisper. "I was in the bathroom. I saw it." Nicholas ran his hands through his hair. "June, why didn't you tell me?" The question hung in the air like smoke. June stared at her hands, at the wedding ring she was still wearing despite everything. "When?" she finally asked. "When exactly should I have told you? Between your conference calls? During the 30 minutes you're home before falling asleep? Or maybe while you were explaining why our marriage was a mistake?" Nicholas flinched. "That's not what I said. It's what you meant." June looked up at him then, and he saw the depth of hurt in her hazel eyes. "You said we both deserved better than this. You said I deserved better than you. So I was giving you what you wanted." "I never wanted—" Nicholas stopped, his jaw working. "I wanted to protect you." "From what?" "From me. From the person I've become." His voice cracked slightly. "June, I see the way you look at me now. Like I'm a stranger. And you're right. I am a stranger. I don't know when I stopped being the man you fell in love with, but somewhere along the way I did." June felt tears threatening again. "You stopped looking at me, Nicholas. You stopped seeing me. Do you know how invisible I felt? How many nights I sat at that ridiculous dining table eating dinner alone while you worked in your office? I was building something for us. You were building something for you." The words exploded out of her. "I never asked for the penthouse or the designer clothes or the charity galas where I stood next to you like an accessory. I asked for you. Just you." Nicholas was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was raw. "I got scared." "Of what?" "Of not being enough. Of failing you the way my father failed my mother." He looked down at his hands. "She left him when I was 12. Said he was a good man who'd forgotten how to be a good husband. And I swore I'd never put someone I loved through that." June's anger wavered. Nicholas rarely talked about his childhood, about the father who'd built a successful business, but lost his family in the process. "So instead, you left me first," she said quietly. "I thought—" I thought if I could just build something big enough, stable enough, you'd never have to worry about anything. But somewhere along the way, I forgot that what you needed wasn't security. It was me. Tears were sliding down June's cheeks now. I needed my husband, not my provider, not my protector, my partner. Nicholas slid off the chair and knelt in front of her, his hands hovering near hers, but not quite touching. I know, and I know I have no right to ask this, but can you give me another chance? Can you give us another chance? June looked at this man she'd loved for so long, seeing glimpses of the person who'd once built her a garden in their tiny apartment's fire escape, who'd danced with her in the rain on their second date. There's 3 of us now, she whispered, her hand moving to her stomach. I know. Nicholas's eyes followed the movement. And I want to be the father our child deserves. The husband you deserve, if you'll let me try. From the kitchen, Lennox cleared her throat pointedly. Time's up, billionaire boy. But June wasn't ready for him to leave. Not yet. Because for the first time in months, she'd seen something in Nicholas's eyes that had been missing for too long. Hope. Second chances aren't given. They're earned. One broken piece at a time. June stared at Nicholas kneeling before her. This powerful man who commanded boardrooms and billion-dollar deals, now looking as vulnerable as she'd ever seen him. His perfectly pressed suit was wrinkled, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, and in his gray eyes she saw something she hadn't seen in years. Fear. Not the calculated concern of a CEO managing risk, but the raw terror of a man who just realized he might lose everything that actually mattered. June? Lennox's voice cut through the silence. You don't owe him anything. But that wasn't entirely true, was it? She owed their child a chance at having both parents. She owed herself the truth about whether the man she'd fallen in love with still existed somewhere beneath the corporate armor. And maybe, just maybe, she owed Nicholas the opportunity to prove he could change. I need conditions, June said finally, her voice steadier than her heartbeat. If we're going to try this, and I'm not saying we are, but if we do, it can't be the same as before. Nicholas nodded immediately. Anything. Don't agree so fast. You don't know what I'm going to ask. He settled back on his heels, waiting. June took a shaky breath. First, we don't go back to the penthouse, not right away. I need space to think, to figure out if I can trust you again. And I need to know you can exist outside that marble fortress you built around yourself. Where do you want to live? I don't know yet. Somewhere normal. Somewhere real. She looked around Lennox's cramped but warm apartment. Somewhere that feels like a home instead of a museum. Nicholas glanced around the space, taking in the mismatched furniture, the photos covering every surface, the plants thriving in their simple pots. Okay. Second, you scale back at work. I'm not asking you to abandon stellar dynamics, but I'm not going to be a single mother while married to a man who lives at his office. This time, Nicholas hesitated. June could practically see the gears turning in his head. The board meetings, the Mars project, the international deals that required his constant attention. How much scaling back? He asked carefully. 40 hours a week, like a normal person. June, I run a $4 billion company, and I'm carrying your child. Her voice sharpened. Figure it out, Nicholas. Delegate. Hire more people. I don't care how you do it. But if you want this family, you need to make room for it in your life. The silence stretched between them. From the kitchen, Lennox was pretending to make coffee while obviously listening to every word. Okay, Nicholas said finally. 40 hours. I can make that work. June studied his face, looking for signs that he was just telling her what she wanted to hear, but his expression was serious, almost grim, as if he was already calculating what he'd have to sacrifice. Third, she continued, we see a counselor, together, because whatever broke between us, it's going to take more than good intentions to fix it. I can arrange for someone to come to us. No, June shook her head. We go to them. We sit in their office like normal people and do the work. No special treatment, no concierge therapy. We do this the real way. Nicholas looked uncomfortable, but he nodded. If that's what you want, it's what we need. June wrapped the blanket tighter around herself. And fourth, you move out of the penthouse anyway. Even if I decide I can't do this, even if we end up divorced, you find somewhere else to live. Somewhere that isn't a monument to your success. June, you said you've become someone you don't recognize. So stop living like him. Find out who you are when you're not performing the role of Nicholas Wexler, billionaire CEO. This request seemed to shake him more than the others. The penthouse wasn't just his home. It was his symbol, his proof that he'd made it. that he was nothing like his father who'd lost everything trying to build an empire. "Where would I live?" he asked, and for a moment he sounded almost lost. "I don't know. Maybe try a normal apartment, maybe buy a house in the suburbs with a yard where our child can play." June's hand moved unconsciously to her stomach. "Maybe figure out what home actually means to you." Nicholas was quiet for a long time, staring at his hands. When he looked up, his eyes were bright with something that might have been tears. "You're asking me to give up everything I've built?" "No," June said softly. "I'm asking you to remember what you built it for." The apartment fell silent except for the sound of traffic outside, and Lennox aggressively stirring her coffee. June could see Nicholas processing, his brilliant mind working through the implications of what she was asking. Finally, he stood up and pulled out his phone. "What are you doing?" June asked. "Calling my assistant. If I'm going to find a new place to live and restructure my entire work schedule, I need to start now." He paused, looking down at her. "Unless, are you saying yes? Are you willing to try?" June looked at this man who'd been her husband for 3 years, the father of the child growing inside her, the person who'd once been her best friend and greatest love. She thought about the Nicholas who'd built her a garden on their fire escape, who'd learned to cook her favorite soup when she was sick, who'd once driven 4 hours to surprise her with her favorite cupcakes from her hometown bakery. That man was still in there somewhere. She had to believe that. "I'm saying maybe," she whispered. "And for now, maybe is all I've got." Nicholas smiled then, the first real smile she'd seen from him in months. "Maybe is enough." As he started making his calls, June caught Lennox's eye. Her best friend was watching her with a mixture of concern and hope, and June realized she felt the same way. Maybe it would work. Maybe it wouldn't. But for the first time in a long time, she was willing to find out. Some people are born knowing how to live. Others have to learn it the hard way, one awkward step at a time. Nicholas Wexler had never shopped for his own groceries. Standing in the fluorescent-lit aisles of a Queens supermarket at 3 p.m. on a Tuesday, he felt more out of place than he had at his first board meeting. His $1,000 suit drew stares from other customers, and he couldn't figure out why there were so many different types of milk. "Excuse me," he asked a teenage employee restocking shelves. "What's the difference between organic, grass-fed, and regular milk?" The kid, whose name tag read Tyler, looked at him like he'd asked about quantum physics. One costs more?" Nicholas nodded seriously and grabbed the most expensive option, then immediately second-guessed himself. June had always been the one who handled their household purchases. He'd signed the checks, but she'd made the choices about what they ate, where they lived, how they lived. Now, standing in front of an entire wall of breakfast cereals, he realized he didn't even know what kind June liked. His phone buzzed. A text from June. "How's the apartment hunting going?" Nicholas looked around the supermarket, then at his cart containing overpriced milk, 3 different types of bread, because he couldn't decide, and enough frozen meals to feed a small army. "Educational," he typed back. "Did you know there are 17 different kinds of pasta sauce?" Her response came quickly. "Wait until you discover the world of toilet paper options." Despite everything, Nicholas found himself smiling. It was the first joke June had made with him in months. 2 hours later, he stood in the doorway of a modest 2-bedroom apartment in Astoria, still wearing his suit and holding grocery bags like a lost tourist. The real estate agent, a no-nonsense woman named Carmen, raised an eyebrow at his appearance. "You sure about this neighborhood, Mr. Wexler? I've got some nice high-rises in Manhattan that might be more your speed." Nicholas looked around the apartment. It had hardwood floors that creaked, windows that actually opened, and a kitchen where you could reach everything without taking more than 3 steps. From the living room window, he could see a small community garden where kids were playing between the vegetable plots. "This is perfect," he said, surprising himself. Carmen looked skeptical. "The building's old. No doorman, no concierge. You'd have to do your own laundry." "People do their own laundry?" She stared at him. "Sir, how exactly have you been living?" That afternoon, Nicholas called June from his new, empty apartment, sitting on the floor because he hadn't bought furniture yet. "I got the place," he said. 2 bedrooms, 1 for us and 1 for the baby. How does it feel?" June's voice was careful, but curious. Nicholas looked around the space that cost less per month than he usually spent on wine. "Terrifying. But good terrifying? Like jumping out of a plane terrifying. You've never jumped out of a plane?" "I have now, metaphorically speaking." He paused. "June, I found a therapist. Dr. Patricia Hendricks. She has an opening Thursday at 6 p.m. Would that work for you? You made an appointment already?" I figured if I was going to do this, I should do it right. Nicholas ran his hand through his hair. I also may have bought 17 different kinds of pasta sauce because I didn't know which one you liked. June's laugh was soft but genuine. I like the simple marinara, the one that costs $3, not $30. Good to know. Thursday came faster than Nicholas expected. He'd spent the week learning how to use a washing machine. It took 3 YouTube videos. Figuring out how to cook something that didn't come in a box. He burned 2 omelets. And trying to furnish an apartment without hiring a decorator. Dr. Hendrix's office was nothing like he'd imagined. No leather couches or diplomas on the walls, just 2 comfortable chairs, a box of tissues, and a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair, pulled back in a simple ponytail. "So," she said once he and June were seated, carefully maintaining distance between their chairs, "tell me why you're here." Nicholas opened his mouth to deliver what he'd mentally rehearsed, a concise explanation of their marital difficulties and goals for resolution. But June spoke first. "He asked for a divorce the same day I found out I was pregnant, and he didn't know about the baby because I was too scared to tell him." Dr. Hendrix nodded. "That must have been incredibly painful for both of you." "I thought I was protecting her," Nicholas said quickly. "I thought if I stepped away, she could find someone who could make her happy." "And what made you think you couldn't make her happy?" The question hung in the air. Nicholas felt exposed, like he was in a business meeting where someone had just asked him to explain a failure he didn't fully understand himself. "I don't know," he admitted. I stopped knowing how." "Doctor?" Hendrix turned to June. "How did that feel, being protected from your own marriage?" June's eyes filled with tears. "Like I was disappearing. Like I didn't matter enough to fight for." Nicholas felt something crack in his chest. "You were the only thing that mattered. You are the only thing that matters." "Then why did it take divorce papers for you to remember that?" It was a fair question. Nicholas looked down at his hands that could sign billion-dollar deals but had forgotten how to hold his wife. "Because," he said slowly, "it was easier to be successful than to risk being human." Dr. Hendrix leaned forward slightly. "What does being human mean to you, Nicholas?" Nicholas thought about his new apartment, about burning omelets and doing laundry and not knowing the difference between pasta sauces, about sitting on the floor instead of behind a mahogany desk. "Messy," he said finally. "Being human means being messy, and I've spent so long trying to control everything that I forgot how to just be." June was crying now, but she was also looking at him, really looking at him, for the first time in months. "This is going to be hard work," Dr. Hendrix said gently. "Both of you have patterns you'll need to break, walls you'll need to tear down. Are you both ready for that?" Nicholas looked at June, at the woman carrying his child, at the person he'd almost lost because he'd been too afraid to be imperfect. "I'm ready to learn," he said. June wiped her eyes and nodded. "Me too." As they left the office together, walking slowly toward their separate cars, June turned to him. "Nicholas, the pasta sauce thing, it's actually kind of sweet." He smiled. "Wait until you see what I did to your favorite cookies. I bought 12 boxes because I couldn't remember if you liked chocolate chip or oatmeal raisin." "Both," June said softly. "I like both." It was a small thing, but it felt like a beginning. Sometimes the universe tests your commitment just when you think you're finally getting it right. 3 weeks into their tentative reconciliation, Nicholas had settled into a routine that would have been unimaginable a month ago. He woke up in his Astoria apartment, made coffee in a kitchen where he could touch both walls with his arms outstretched, and took the subway to work like millions of other New Yorkers. The subway had been a revelation. Sitting shoulder to shoulder with teachers and nurses and construction workers, Nicholas discovered a world that existed beyond boardrooms and private jets. He'd started bringing a book instead of his phone, and sometimes he'd catch himself just watching people, really seeing them in a way he'd forgotten how to do. Today, he was meeting June for lunch at a small cafe in Brooklyn Heights. It had become their Thursday tradition, a neutral ground where they could practice being together without the weight of their shared history pressing down on them. She was already there when he arrived, sitting by the window with her hand resting on her stomach. At 12 weeks, her pregnancy was just starting to show, a gentle curve that made something fierce and protective rise in his chest every time he saw it. "You're smiling," June observed as he sat down across from her. "The barista at the coffee shop near my apartment knows my order now," Nicholas said, surprising himself with how pleased this made him. "She just sees me coming and starts making my usual, which is large coffee, black, with a blueberry muffin. Apparently I'm a creature of habit." June laughed, and the sound hit him like sunshine after rain. You used to order different espresso drinks every day when we first started dating. You said variety was the spice of life. I was showing off, Nicholas admitted, trying to seem sophisticated and worldly. You were 28 and owned 3 suits total. I thought it was charming. They ordered lunch, grilled cheese and tomato soup for June, a turkey sandwich for Nicholas, and talked about safe things. Her latest client, a community center that wanted a rooftop garden, his efforts to delegate more at work, harder than expected, their upcoming appointment with Dr. Hendricks, progress but slow. Nicholas was telling her about his disastrous attempt to install a ceiling fan when his phone rang. The ringtone, Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, made several nearby diners look up with annoyance. I should probably... Nicholas started to reach for it. Let it go to voicemail, June said quietly. Nicholas hesitated. 6 months ago, he would have answered without question. Phone calls meant deals, opportunities, crises that only he could solve. But looking at June's face, seeing the careful hope in her eyes, he pressed the decline button. There, he said. Gone. The phone immediately started ringing again. This time, the name on the screen made Nicholas's stomach clench. James Richter, chairman of the board at Stellar Dynamics. James didn't call unless something was very, very wrong. Nicholas, you have to take it, June said, reading his expression. It's okay. But it wasn't okay, and they both knew it. The fragile bubble they'd been building around their lunch date suddenly felt tissue thin. Nicholas answered on the 4th ring. James, I'm in a meeting. We have a problem. James's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. The Mars satellite launches tomorrow, and the primary guidance system is showing anomalies. The team is calling for a scrub, but we've got senators watching. $3 billion on the line and SpaceX breathing down our necks. Nicholas felt the familiar rush of adrenaline, the call to battle that had defined his life for so long. Across the table, June was carefully not watching him, but he could see the tension in her shoulders. What kind of anomalies? He asked. Intermittent signal loss during pre-flight checks. Could be a software glitch. Could be hardware. The engineers are split 50-50 on whether to proceed. Nicholas closed his eyes. In the old days, he would have been at the launch facility for weeks leading up to this moment, sleeping 3 hours a night, living on coffee, and the thrill of putting American technology into space. The Mars satellite was his baby, the project that would cement Stellar Dynamics' place in history. I need you here, Nicholas, tonight. This is your call to make. June was staring at him now, her grilled cheese forgotten. He could see her calculating, measuring his response against all the promises he'd made about being different, about putting family first. James, the car's already on its way to get you. Flight leaves in 2 hours. The line went dead. Nicholas stared at his phone, feeling the weight of 2 worlds pulling him in opposite directions. You have to go, June said quietly. No, I don't. I have perfectly capable people who can handle this. Nicholas, this is the Mars project. You've been working on it for 3 years. I've been working on us for 3 weeks, he said firmly. Which one do you think is more important? June's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. Don't make me choose for you. Don't put that on me. I'm not choosing Mars over you, I'm choosing you over Mars. And what happens when you do that? When your company loses $3 billion and hundreds of jobs because you stayed in Brooklyn to eat grilled cheese with your pregnant wife? June's voice was rising, drawing stares from other diners. What happens when you start resenting me for it? Nicholas reached across the table, trying to take her hand, but she pulled away. June, listen to me. No, you listen. She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. I fell in love with Nicholas Wexler, the brilliant CEO who put satellites in space. I didn't fall in love with him despite his ambition. I fell in love with him because of it. What I needed wasn't for you to become someone else. I needed you to remember that I existed while you were being yourself. She grabbed her purse, her hand shaking. Go to Houston, Nicholas. Save your satellite. But figure out how to do it without losing us in the process. Because if you can't... She paused at the table, her voice breaking. If you can't find a way to be both the man who builds rockets and the man who comes home for dinner, then maybe we're just fooling ourselves. June walked out of the cafe, leaving Nicholas sitting alone with 2 unfinished lunches and the weight of an impossible choice. Outside, he could hear the distant sound of a car pulling up to the curb. His ride to the airport had arrived. The moment of truth isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just a man sitting in a car deciding who he wants to be. Nicholas sat in the back of the black sedan, his phone buzzing with messages from Houston, his laptop open to mission-critical data streams, and his heart somewhere on the sidewalk where June had left it. The driver, a middle-aged man named Frank who'd been ferrying executives around New York for 20 years, glanced in the rearview mirror. "Airport, right, sir?" "Just drive for a minute," Nicholas said, his voice hollow. "I need to think." Frank nodded and pulled into traffic. Through the tinted windows, Nicholas watched Brooklyn Heights roll past. Brownstones with flower boxes, couples walking dogs, kids playing in pocket parks. Normal life. The kind of life he'd been learning to live. His phone rang again. "James Richter." This time, Nicholas answered. "Tell me exactly what's happening," he said without preamble. "The guidance system keeps losing signal for 30-second intervals. Engineering Team A says it's a software bug we can patch remotely. Team B says it could be a hardware failure that'll cause catastrophic mission failure." Nicholas pulled up the technical reports on his laptop, his trained eye scanning lines of code and diagnostic data that would be gibberish to most people. This was his element. Complex problems that required split-second decisions worth billions of dollars. "What does Sarah think?" he asked, referring to his lead engineer. "She's with Team B, says her gut tells her something's wrong, but she can't prove it." Nicholas trusted Sarah's gut more than most people's facts. She'd been with him since the early days, when Stellar Dynamics was just him and 4 engineers in a rented warehouse in Queens. "And if we scrub?" Nicholas asked. "We lose the launch window. Next opportunity isn't for 3 months. The board is already breathing down our necks about costs, and canceling would—" James's voice cracked slightly. "It would be bad, Nicholas. Really bad." Through the car window, Nicholas saw a young father pushing a stroller, his wife walking beside him with her hand on her growing belly. They were laughing about something, completely absorbed in each other and their small world. He used to look at couples like that with a mixture of pity and incomprehension. How could anyone be satisfied with such a small life when there was so much to achieve, so much to build? Now he understood. They weren't settling for small lives. They were choosing what mattered. "James," Nicholas said quietly, "patch me through to Sarah." "Nicholas, we don't have time for another round of technical discussion. Patch me through. Now." Sarah's voice came through crystal clear from Mission Control in Houston. In the background, Nicholas could hear the controlled chaos of a launch facility. Dozens of voices, computer alerts, the electric tension of controlled danger. "Nicholas, thank God. We need to make a call in the next hour." "Sarah, forget the politics. Forget the money. If this was your satellite, your mission, what would you do?" There was a pause. When Sarah spoke again, her voice was steady and sure. "I'd scrub. Something's wrong, Nick. I can feel it in my bones. The data might not show it clearly, but 30 years in this business has taught me to trust my instincts. Even if it costs us $3 billion? Better than losing astronauts' lives when we start sending people up on these systems next year." Nicholas closed his eyes. Sarah was right. She was always right about the technical stuff. But this decision wasn't just technical. It was the culmination of everything he'd built, everything he'd sacrificed for, including June. "Sarah, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Nicholas said. "I'm authorizing you to make the call. You have full decision-making authority for this mission." "Nicholas, what are you saying?" "I'm saying you don't need me there. You never did. You're the best engineer I've ever worked with, and it's time I started trusting my team to do what I hired them to do." He could hear Sarah's sharp intake of breath. "Are you sure? Scrub the mission. Fix whatever's wrong. Launch when it's safe, not when it's convenient." Nicholas ended the call and immediately dialed James Richter. "James, Sarah has full authority on the Mars project. Whatever she decides, I back 100%. Nicholas, you can't just—" "Yes, I can. And I am." Nicholas felt a strange lightness in his chest, as if he'd been holding his breath for years and was finally exhaling. "James, I built this company to push the boundaries of what's possible. But the most important boundary I need to push right now is the one I built around my own life." Nicholas hung up and looked at Frank in the rearview mirror. "Change of plans. Brooklyn Heights. There's a cafe on Montague Street. Rosemary's Kitchen. You know it?" Frank smiled. "I know it. My wife and I had our first date there 30 years ago." "How did you know she was the one?" Frank considered this as he navigated through traffic. "She saw me. Really saw me. Not the guy I thought I should be, just the guy I was. And she decided that was enough." Nicholas thought about June in their early days, sketching gardens on napkins while he talked about rocket trajectories. She'd seen the dreamer beneath the businessman, the man who wanted to touch the stars not for glory but for wonder. Somewhere along the way, He'd forgotten that dreams were meant to be shared. The cafe came into view, and through the window Nicholas could see June still sitting at their table. She was staring at her phone, and he could tell she'd been crying. "She's still there," Frank observed. "Yeah," Nicholas said, his throat tight. "She's still there." He paid Frank and stood on the sidewalk for a moment, watching June through the window. She looked up as if she'd felt his gaze, and their eyes met through the glass. Nicholas held up his phone and typed a text. "I chose us." June's phone buzzed. She read the message, looked up at him with wide eyes, and then did something that made his heart race. She smiled. Nicholas walked into the cafe, sat down across from his wife, and reached for her hand. "The satellite?" she asked quietly. "We'll launch when it's safe, not when it's convenient. Sarah's making the call, and you're okay with that?" Nicholas looked at their joined hands, at the simple gold band June still wore despite everything. "I spent so many years thinking I had to control everything that if I wasn't personally managing every detail, everything would fall apart. But you know what I realized sitting in that car?" June shook her head. "The most important thing I ever built isn't in space, it's right here. And I almost lost it because I was too scared to trust anyone else with the less important stuff." June's eyes filled with tears. "Nicholas, I love that you fell in love with my ambition," he said, squeezing her hand. "But I need you to know that my biggest ambition now is figuring out how to be the man you and our baby deserve." They sat in comfortable silence, hands intertwined across the small table, while around them the cafe hummed with normal life. Couples sharing dessert, friends laughing over coffee, students studying for exams. Normal, beautiful, ordinary life. And for the first time in years, Nicholas Wexler felt like he was exactly where he belonged. Love isn't about perfect moments. It's about choosing each other through all the imperfect ones. 6 months later, Nicholas Wexler was on his hands and knees in the dirt, cursing at a stubborn tomato plant while his very pregnant wife laughed at him from her lawn chair. "You're talking to it like it's a board member," June said, her hand resting on her enormous belly. At 8 months pregnant, she glowed with the kind of contentment Nicholas had once thought was a myth. "Maybe that's the problem," Nicholas muttered, wiping sweat from his forehead and leaving a streak of soil behind. "Hey, plant, I'm not firing you. I'm just asking you to grow." They were in the backyard of their new house in Park Slope, a 3-bedroom brownstone with creaky floors, original moldings, and a garden that June had been designing since the day they'd signed the papers. It wasn't anything like the penthouse. It was better. "The tomatoes look fine," June said. "You're just impatient." "I've been patient for 3 months. When do they actually produce tomatoes?" "When they're ready. Not everything operates on a quarterly timeline, Mr. Former CEO. Nicholas sat back on his heels, looking at the small urban oasis June had created. Raised beds full of vegetables, herbs growing in neat rows, a small fruit tree they'd planted together during her second trimester. It was nothing like the elaborate rooftop garden she designed for her clients, but it felt more real than anything they'd ever owned. "Former CEO?" he asked. June smiled. "Sarah called while you were at therapy. The Mars satellite launched perfectly yesterday. No glitches, perfect orbital insertion. She wanted to thank you for trusting her with the decision." Nicholas felt a familiar surge of pride, but it was different now. Quieter, less desperate. And the board officially voted to promote her to Chief Technical Officer. She's running all launch operations now. Good. She's better at it than I ever was. It was true. In the 6 months since Nicholas had stepped back from day-to-day operations, Stellar Dynamics had become more innovative, more efficient, and ironically, more profitable. Turns out, micromanaging brilliant people had been holding them back. Nicholas now served as chairman of the board, working 3 days a week from a small office in downtown Brooklyn. He still dreamed about space, still pushed the boundaries of what was possible, but he'd learned to dream with his feet firmly planted on Earth. "There's something else," June said, shifting in her chair as the baby kicked. "Dr. Martinez called with the ultrasound results." Nicholas's attention snapped to her immediately. June was due in 4 weeks, and every medical appointment still made him nervous. The pregnancy had been healthy, but after almost losing them both, he couldn't help but worry. "Everything okay?" June's smile widened. "Everything's perfect, but do you want to know what we're having?" They'd decided to wait, to let it be a surprise. But sitting here in their garden, surrounded by the life they'd rebuilt together, Nicholas found himself desperately curious about the little person who'd soon complete their family. "Do you want to know?" he asked. "I've been thinking about it, and yes, I want to be able to picture her, or him." "Her or him," Nicholas repeated, moving to sit beside her chair. Either way, they're going to be amazing. June pulled out her phone and showed him a message from Dr. Martinez. Congratulations, you're having a daughter. A daughter. Nicholas felt something shift in his chest, a fierce protectiveness mixed with wonder and terror. He was going to be responsible for raising a little girl in this complicated world. A daughter, he whispered. Are you disappointed? I know you probably wanted a boy to carry on the family name. June. Nicholas took her hand, his voice thick with emotion. I couldn't be happier. A little girl who looks like you, who has your laugh and your stubborn streak and your talent for making beautiful things grow. She might look like you, have your brain for complex problems. God help us all if she has my brain and your determination, Nicholas said, making June laugh. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over their small slice of Brooklyn. Next door, their neighbor Mrs. Chen was watering her flowers while her granddaughter played hopscotch on the sidewalk. Across the street, a young couple was walking their dog, arguing playfully about what to have for dinner. It was ordinary. It was perfect. Nicholas? June said softly. I'm scared. He turned to look at her, seeing the vulnerability she rarely let show. About the baby? About us. About whether we can really do this. Whether we've changed enough, learned enough. She looked down at their joined hands. What if we mess it up again? Nicholas was quiet for a moment, thinking about all the ways they'd grown over the past months. The weekly therapy sessions where they'd learned to fight fair and forgive deeper. The small daily choices to choose each other over convenience or habit. The way they'd learned to build a life instead of just sharing space. We probably will mess up, he said finally. We'll have bad days and hard conversations and moments where we forget everything we've learned. June looked worried. But, Nicholas continued, we'll mess up together, and we'll fix it together. That's what makes us different from before. Before I thought love meant being perfect for you. Now I know it means being real with you. June squeezed his hand. Even when real is messy? Especially when real is messy. As if summoned by their conversation, June suddenly winced and pressed her hand to her belly. Oh, she said, her eyes widening. Oh, that was different. Nicholas was on his feet immediately. Different how? Should I call Dr. Martinez? Should we go to the hospital? Nicholas, breathe. June was smiling despite the discomfort. I think our daughter just decided she's ready to meet us. Now? But she's not due for another month. Babies don't follow quarterly timelines either, June said, echoing his earlier complaint about the tomatoes. And this feels very real. As they made their way inside to grab the hospital bag they'd packed weeks ago, Nicholas looked back at their garden one more time. The tomatoes were finally starting to ripen, small green orbs that would be red and perfect in their own time, just like everything else worth growing. 2 hours later, Nicholas held his daughter for the first time in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and new beginnings. She was tiny and perfect, with June's dark hair and what the nurses swore were Nicholas's eyes. Hello, little one, he whispered, his voice rough with tears. I'm your dad, and I promise you, I'm going to be here for every moment I can. The big ones and the small ones and all the ordinary ones in between. June, exhausted but radiant, watched her husband fall in love with their daughter. What should we call her? Nicholas asked. June smiled. Hope? Her name is Hope. And as Nicholas looked at his wife and daughter, surrounded by the family they'd almost lost and then fought to rebuild, he thought about how perfectly she'd chosen, because that's what they were now, what they'd always been, even in the darkest moments. They were hope. What grows in the garden of second chances? Everything beautiful you thought you'd lost forever, where love takes root. 2 years later, the morning sun filtered through the kitchen windows of their Park Slope brownstone, casting golden squares across the hardwood floors where 2-year-old Hope Wexler was having a very serious conversation with her stuffed elephant about the proper way to stack blocks. No, Ellie, she said with the grave authority that only toddlers possess. Big ones go on bottom. That's engineering. June looked up from her laptop where she was reviewing designs for a community garden in Queens and caught Nicholas grinning at their daughter over his cup of coffee. Engineering? June raised an eyebrow. She's 2, Nicholas. What have you been teaching her? Basic structural principles are never too early to learn, Nicholas said seriously, then broke into a smile when Hope abandoned her blocks to crawl into his lap, leaving chocolate fingerprints on his weekend jeans. This was their Saturday morning routine now. Nicholas made pancakes. He'd gotten good at it through trial and error. June worked on projects that excited her rather than just paid the bills. and Hope ruled over their small kingdom with the benevolent tyranny of a well-loved child. "Daddy outside?" Hope pointed toward the backyard, where the tomato plants Nicholas had cursed at 2 years ago were now producing their third successful harvest. "After breakfast, Bug. We need to check on the new seedlings Mommy planted." June watched this exchange with the quiet contentment of someone who'd learned to recognize happiness when it was sitting right in front of her. It wasn't the dramatic, sweeping romance of movies. It was better. It was real, built day by day through small choices and ordinary moments that added up to everything. The past 2 years hadn't been perfect. They'd fought about money. June wanted to donate more to charity. Nicholas worried about Hope's college fund. They'd disagreed about work-life balance. June thought Nicholas was still taking on too many board positions. Nicholas thought June was undercharging for her landscape designs. They'd had sleepless nights with a colicky baby, moments of doubt, days when they were too tired to remember why they'd fought so hard to save their marriage. But they'd kept showing up. For each other. For Hope. For the life they were building one imperfect day at a time. "I have something to tell you," June said, closing her laptop and moving to the kitchen island where Nicholas was cutting Hope's pancakes into precise little squares. "Good something or concerning something?" Nicholas asked, though his tone was light. They'd learned to communicate better over the years, to share worries before they became fears and dreams before they became disappointments. "Good something, I think," June smiled. "Mrs. Patterson from the community center called yesterday. They want to offer me the position." Nicholas looked up sharply. "The head of landscape architecture position? For the whole parks department?" "The whole borough, actually. They're expanding the program." It was a big job, the kind of position June had dreamed about back when she was sketching gardens on napkins and talking about changing how cities thought about green spaces. It would mean more responsibility, longer hours, and yes, more time away from their perfectly imperfect Saturday mornings. "That's incredible, June. You'd be amazing at it." "It would mean travel, some evenings, more complicated schedules." Nicholas set down his knife and really looked at her. 2 years ago, this conversation would have triggered his anxiety about being needed, about maintaining control. Now, he saw it for what it was. His brilliant wife getting the recognition she deserved. "So we'll figure it out," he said simply. "We're pretty good at figuring things out now." June felt tears prick her eyes. This was what she'd needed all along. Not a husband who made her dreams smaller to fit his fears, but one who helped her build them bigger. "I love you," she said, the words carrying the weight of everything they'd lost and found and chosen to keep. "I love you too," Nicholas replied, then lifted Hope up to sit on the counter. "What do you think, Bug? Should Mommy take the job where she gets to build gardens for the whole city?" Hope considered this with toddler seriousness. "Big gardens?" "Very big gardens," June confirmed. "With flowers?" "Lots of flowers." Hope clapped her chocolate sticky hands together. "Yes, Mommy builds all the gardens." They all laughed. And in that moment, June thought about how far they'd come from the couple who'd nearly divorced because they'd forgotten how to see each other. Later that afternoon, they were in the backyard, June directing the planting of new herb seedlings while Nicholas helped Hope water everything with the careful concentration of a NASA engineer. When Nicholas's phone rang, he glanced at it, then at June. "Sarah," he said. "Take it." June nodded. "Hope and I can handle the basil," Nicholas answered, wandering to the corner of their small yard. June could hear pieces of the conversation, something about a new Mars mission, a request for Nicholas to consult on the guidance systems, a chance to be part of history again. When he hung up, he was smiling. "And?" June asked. "They want me to advise on the crewed Mars mission. 2 days a month, mostly remote work. They specifically said they needed someone who understands both the technical challenges and the importance of work-life balance." June laughed. "Work-life balance? You're famous for work-life balance now? Apparently, when you step back from micromanaging and start trusting your team, you become a case study in sustainable leadership." Nicholas shrugged. Who knew? As the sun began to set over Brooklyn, painting their small garden in shades of gold and amber, the three of them sat on the back steps. Hope was drowsing in Nicholas's lap, dirt under her tiny fingernails and satisfaction written across her sleepy face. June leaned against her husband's shoulder, thinking about the community gardens she'd design, the green spaces that would outlive them all. "Do you ever miss it?" June asked quietly. "The penthouse? The constant adrenaline? Feeling like you controlled everything?" Nicholas considered this, absently stroking Hope's dark hair. "Sometimes I miss the simplicity of it. when success was just about numbers going up and problems had clear solutions. But I was lonely, even when I was surrounded by people. I was successful, but I wasn't alive. Not really. He kissed the top of June's head. This is messier, but it's real, and I'd rather have a real life with you than a perfect life without you. Hope stirred in his arms, mumbling something about elephants and engineering in her sleep. Besides, Nicholas added, I'm raising a future engineer who thinks flowers and structural integrity are equally important. That seems like a pretty good legacy to me. June smiled, thinking about the gardens growing all around them, the literal ones in their yard, but also the metaphorical ones, the family they'd planted and tended, the love they'd composted from their mistakes and grown into something stronger. Some people, she thought, spent their whole lives searching for the perfect moment, the perfect love, the perfect life, but perfection was overrated. What mattered was choosing each other again and again through all the beautiful, messy, ordinary moments that made up a real life. As they sat together in their small garden, surrounded by everything they'd almost lost and then chosen to keep, June realized that this was what happiness looked like. Not a destination, but a practice. Not a feeling, but a choice. Not perfect, but theirs. And in the end, that was more than enough. It was everything. What beautiful things have grown in the garden of your second chances? Your participation in this channel is very important. Please leave your opinion in the comments. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below letting us know what you thought. Your feedback and support mean a lot to us. Stay tuned for more exciting stories.